This is my original Game Boy Advance from 2002, which I just recently learned means that I was 13 for some reason, and that makes me feel extremely old. But also, I would have bet my life that I was half that age when the SP came out. This is the new Anbernic RG35XXSP, which 21 years later takes the SP design and makes something wonderful from it. I can't stop playing this new SP, so let's do a review. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Joey's Retro Handhelds. I'm Joey, and today we're going to be doing a review of the Anbernic RG35XXSP. It's a clamshell form factor with a 3.5-inch 640 by 480 IPS screen. It has the power to play everything up to and including PlayStation 1 perfectly, with some added bonuses from Nintendo 64, Sega Dreamcast, and Sony PSP. Well, games where the lack of an analog stick, or sticks, don't matter, and don't need a lot of power to run. So consider those systems as kind of bonuses while watching this video. To start it all off, I kind of find myself using this quite a bit, more than I expected, and I'm actually really liking the design as well as the form factor and just the overall use of it. There's some caveats and issues, of course, as there is with any handheld, and we're going to get into it, but I can easily see this being a daily driver for me, and it might be replacing some of my other handhelds as just a single, easy, come-with-me anywhere I go device. Let's get the original Game Boy Advance SP comparisons right out of the way. And here is my original unmodded OEM SP, and size-wise, the 35XX SP is slightly wider, it's taller, and it's thicker than the original SP. It has softer feeling textures as well on the 35XX SP. You kind of just slide a little bit more on the top of it. Hinge angle is very different as well, and it's more angled towards you than the original is, but both have the same amount of range of hinge movement. No point really comparing the screens as you can't see much of anything on the original SP. Buttons and D-pad wise, the 35XX SP feels like a taller version of them. It looks like they took the original buttons and then just grew them. That's kind of really it. There's enough closeness here for anybody looking for an original SP type form factor and design, and you'll get it with this. Like I did with my Anbernic RG556 review, we're going to shuffle things around, and I'm going to start with the great, then we'll get into the good, and then the bad. Starting with the great, and it's the nostalgia aspect. Look, I'm just not going to sit here and tell you that nostalgia for designs and other things don't play a big part in people's choices for what they buy, even if the device isn't as good as others. But that's not the case here. A lot of the community will go out of their way to buy a device with nostalgia looks and designs and all of that. This here is the quintessential nostalgia device, and it's something that hits you as obvious as to why others haven't done it. But it goes further than that. Obviously, we're not going to know the long-term hinge quality and all that. I could sit here and go like this for 24 hours as if I had nothing else better to do and see what happens. But I mean, I've used this for about 3 weeks now, haven't had a single issue with the hinge opening, closing, things like that. As far as I can tell, it seems like it might be a lot better design than maybe the original RetroArch Pocket Flip was. But we won't know until long term. So this might be something we could revisit in 6 months or so, see if there's been any issues, concerns, things like that with the hinge, which a lot of people I'm sure are scared of. But it seems like Anbernic got their ducks in a row with this one, so hopefully, but we'll see. Now I have the transparent blue color here, which is just absolutely beautiful, and fans of the channel know blue is my color. There's also a black transparent, as well as a silver and a gray. Now, one major advantage to the two transparent models is you can add your own stickers or papers or really anything that you want to the top of the device. There's sort of an insert that you can remove and replace, and suddenly you have some great customization to make this really yours. Continuing on, and we're still in the great section here, but power has to be next. For anybody who's familiar with or owns any of the 35XXs, like the Plus, the H, the 2024, or the 28XX, we have the same power here, with the H700 processor, and still running Linux while enjoying the ability to use the same custom firmware options as all of those. Even the stock operating system at this point has become a solid option compared to where it was at the launch of the Plus model months ago, albeit there is still some weirdness which we'll talk about later. I mentioned where this lies performance-wise a little while back, and we can look at that now. Stop me if you've heard this one before, but this is just great for PlayStation 1 and under. I'm apparently 15 hours or so into Pokemon Crystal Kaizo, and it's a ROM hack of Pokemon Crystal, but I've been using fast forward a lot, so those numbers are skewed. But I've also been playing some Super Nintendo with Second Reality Project Reloaded, and Game Boy Advance with even more Pokemon, and I've also run Fire Emblem ROM hacks like Bandit Emblem, where you play as the bad guys and it's pretty fun. And I've just kept going, and sort of sticking to systems that are PlayStation 1 and under, and I'm having an absolute blast. Now, I mentioned it before, but you can play some Nintendo 64, Dreamcast, and PSP here. I'm not going to focus on this, as first, the lack of analog stick makes playing Nintendo 64 on here just a nightmare. And two, as much as a decent amount of the games play okay, and near full speed for a lot of them, it just doesn't feel like the right device for them. So no recommendation from me to get this for any of those systems. Battery is also something that's really great. I didn't do any specific clocking tests, but going off of my many hours playing this, it's at the very least at least 8 hours of Super Nintendo and Game Boy Advance, and more for Game Boy. To say there's zero concern for battery would be an understatement. Last on the great end is the D-pad and buttons. If I never found out, apparently, that the D-pad and buttons are controversial, I probably would have never even mentioned them with respect to noise and pressure or anything like that. I don't know if I just got the golden SP here, but I don't find them loud and I don't find them hard to push. Again, I've spent hours with this device at this point, and those complaints just aren't something that I'm noticing. Maybe I do a little bit more finger exercises than most people. I don't know, but the sound of the buttons are very muted, and not loud in any way, shape, or form. The DualShock 4 buttons are louder, and I have a ton of devices that are way louder than this, even my Odin 2. Personally, I just don't find this to be loud in the slightest. And on the topic of force of push, I don't even know what to say on that front. I push button and button goes. I don't find myself doing anything more than usual. In fact, I absolutely love how precise the D-pad is and how precise the buttons are. I haven't enjoyed playing Pokemon on a handheld like this in as long as I can remember. This is now my go-to experience. Aside from the Anbernic RG Arc, which has a way different style D-pad, this is tied with that D-pad as the best that Anbernic has ever made. It's just been fantastic. If you need some audio feedback on these buttons, let's do it now, and I'll just grab a bunch of handhelds for us to compare. Hopefully that gives you some context into what I mean. Now let's talk about the good, and I can't speak to the texture of the non-transparent models, but I have to say that the plastic on this blue is just good, and it's extremely comfy as well. It has a sort of soft plastic sort of feel, and I'm here all day for that, and surprisingly, it makes me enjoy using this for long periods of time. I wouldn't say this is as comfortable as many of my favorite horizontal handhelds or anything like that, but I won't say this is bad either. This is right in that good section, meaning it shouldn't be a concern. Personally, I find this much comfier than something like the 35XX Plus, for example, just thanks to the bulk and the width. More on the good front here, and it's the front firing speaker. I've actually really been enjoying the sound coming out of this, as long as you're not on full blast with some distortion. But in normal levels, and even on the lowest level, the sound is great. Let's have a quick listen. Somewhere Somewhere between good and bad is the pocketability of the SP. I think this will be person-to-person dependent. Some might not like how bulky and square this is, and some might have no concerns at all. Personally, I don't pocket these as I use a sling bag, but I think for a jacket pocket, there's no issues at all. But jeans might be a concern. In the same in-between good and bad, we have Bluetooth and HDMI support. On the Bluetooth front, pretty simple. Connect your controller to the device using the settings, but you have to change the controls in-game as it puts you as player 2. So just swap the device player 1 and player 2 are using, and you're all set. On the HDMI part, like most retro handhelds, you need to connect it via HDMI when the handheld is completely off. Then turn it on and it'll work. The main menu is stretched, and so is RetroArch's menu. The other issue is that aspect ratios are kind of all over the place using HDMI, with SNES being an example of something broken. Other systems might be fine. And now we get to the bad, and there's a few things here. The first is while Anbernic has made good strides since the release of the 35XX Plus, which started this whole H700 series of devices, and that first release was real bad for software. It's still nowhere near perfect, and quite a few issues still exist. First, the lack of an over-the-air update really hurts, especially when updates for these devices are close to 64 gigabytes, to download directly from Anbernic's website. Then you have to basically completely flash a brand new card, move everything over, and it's just a mess. Never mind the fact that we still can't expand the operating system past 64 gigabytes, so you're forced to use two SD cards if you need more space than 64 gigabytes. Thermals are also another concern. This doesn't get hot like I found with other handhelds, especially the broken MIUI A30, but it does get warm. Even playing something like Game Boy with fast forward on, and I could feel the warmth. But it's never enough to be uncomfortable or anything like that. Just enough that you notice it, and I wanted to mention it. I think that if for some reason you're going to buy this and play Nintendo 64 or Dreamcast or PSP, you're going to notice those thermals a lot more. Another issue that's continued is if you have no shaders applied, the frame pacing is broken on these devices, the SP included. The included shader is Scanlines, which is default out of the box, and it's completely necessary to use a shader to get a smooth playing experience. I show how to replace this with a shader that looks not like a shader in my top 10 video, so you can easily fix it, but it's a band-aid, not a solution. For those susceptible to it, the SP still does have that small interference, speaker noise, dial-up modem sound that the other H700s have. If you want to hear it, go to boot up a game, and before you boot into it, put the device next to your ear, and you're going to hear it. I fully understand that this might not bother a lot of people, but it does for some, especially if you're going to play this in a no-noise environment like late at night. It's even worse if you're charging and playing at the same time, as you're going to get a little coil whine noise plus static throughout. RetroArch is very locked down on the SP. You need to do a bunch of core overrides to fix things, like I showed in my tips video, like enabling load states or fixing the shaders, and so much more. I think that as soon as custom firmware solves the lid problem, that'll be my go-to option and the one that I recommend to most people. Personally, I'm waiting for MUOS. Lastly, it's the lid closing. Alright, so this might sound like the most controversial thing in this review, but I honestly think that this device needed to be Android instead of Linux. The H700 devices do not have proper sleep, and that's continued here with this device. If you close the lid in sleep mode, you're going to lose 3 to 5% per hour in battery life. That means that in 24 hours, your device is completely dead. With an Android device, it would be 3 to 6% per day. You can change the lid behavior to shut down instead of sleep, and it'll boot back into the game that you were playing if you do so, but that entire sequence takes almost 30 seconds from power start to into a game, and for some reason, the brightness lowers as well, which seems to be a bug. This is a sequence that, if you had proper sleep, it would take 1 to 2 seconds. I fully understand that not many will agree with me on this, but it's kind of soured my experience of the whole point of the handheld existing, and that's the lid opening and closing to start and exit my games. It's not all doom and gloom. MEOS is working on a feature to sleep for X number of minutes and then shut down after, which would be a great option. I just find myself wishing that Anbernic did a lot better here. That's all. And that's my rundown of this device and everything that comes with it. And I said it at the beginning, but I'm absolutely in love with this. I love using it. It is fantastic. It is a new daily driver for me to use as just a quick pick up and play, some Game Boy and Pokemon and all of that. I don't see much competition coming in the way of this. The Miu Flip after the Miu A30 is not on my radar really at all right now. Retroid hopefully will have a Flip too, and we'll see what that looks like. And if I was Retroid seeing the sales of the SP, I would be jumping right now to make that Flip too and make it proper. So that's going to be it for this one. I know this review was late. I had a lot of things going on, but I still want to get to it. And hopefully you have your devices in hands now, and this might help you and see if my review jives with what you're seeing on your end. Don't forget to like and sub to help the channel grow. Come join me on the Discord to talk about this and other handhelds. Support me on Patreon if you like my videos. And hope you all have a good one.